The Beatles. The Beatles were an English rock band formed in Liverpool in 1960. They are the most influential band in the rock era. John Lennon first started the band in 1957 when he was only 16, forming the Caravan with some school friends. In May, they changed their names to Silver Beatles, but then later changed it again to The Beatles. At the time, Ringo Starr was not part of the band, but later on replaced Pete Best, the temporary drummer. The official band consists of 4 members: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. The band was first playing in nightclubs covering songs, but then started writing their own songs and released their first single, Love Me Do, in 1962. It was number 17 in the UK and 2 years later number 1 in the US. Record companies started noticing, especially after the Beatles' second album, With the Beatles, became the second album to sell millions of copies in the UK. VJ Records obtained rights and officially introduced the band to the US in 1964. Beatlemania had already spread in the US and UK, especially after the band appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show with about 73 million people watching. The band was touring all over the world and were really dedicated to their music. They even recorded one of their whole albums in just one day. The band had 12 original albums in total. Some of their inspirations were Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly. In 1964, the Beatles were making a couple of movies like Help and The Beatles' Yellow Submarine Adventure. They won many awards like the Grammys, the Brit Awards, and the World Music Awards. The Beatles were drifting apart and eventually broke up in 1970. George Harrison was the lead guitarist of the Beatles, auditioning only when he was 14. While part of the Beatles, Harrison separately recorded 2 albums. After the Beatles broke up, he released those 2 albums. George started having concerts in Bangladesh and even converted to Hinduism. He married Olivia Trinidad and had a son, Danny. George died on November 29, 2001 from lung cancer. He was cremated and his ashes were poured near the Ganges River. John Lennon left the Beatles in 1969 and later released albums Yoko Ono, his wife. At first the albums were a flop, but then became a top 10 hit. He moved to the US, but later on divorced Yoko. They got back together in 1975, settled down, and had a baby, Sean. In 1980, John Lennon was murdered by Mark David, who shot John multiple times. Paul McCartney was a musician, singer, and songwriter. He wrote many songs with Lennon and is still celebrated today. After the Beatles were separated, Paul started his own band, Wings, with his first wife and Denny Lane. Paul is the most successful artist according to Guinness World Records with sales of over 100 million albums. Ringo Starr is an English musician and actor. He publicly quit the Beatles on April 10, 1970. His solo career was very popular with 8 best-selling albums and hit songs. He had appeared in many television shows like Ringo and Princess Daisy. Ringo had an alcohol problem but went to a rehabilitation clinic and came back healthy. He toured with All Star, a band he formed, and appeared in concert for George, remembering Harrison.